Welcome to the Flash Finds podcast, the world's fastest podcast where we explore how Facebook can help you with the stuff you're into. I'm Emma Rogue, joined by Nathan the Cat Lady, a Facebook creator. So Nathan, if you're into pets, what kind of stuff can you find on Facebook?
Well, I make reels about useful tips for pet owners. For instance, cats don't like still water, so all of my cats have cat fountains.
Oh my gosh, that's so cute. What a great episode. See you next time on the Flash Finds podcast, all about discovering the stuff on Facebook you care about. Bye.
Get the champagne ready. The NBA Finals are here.
Welcome to the NBA Finals.
Let's raise our glasses and our rings to the two phenomenal teams left standing.
My goodness!
Here's to high-stakes action, to thrilling moments we can't miss.
He ties the game at the buzzer!
And to crowning our next champion. Here's a toast to the NBA Finals. The 2024 NBA Finals, presented by YouTube TV, begin Thursday, June 6th on ABC.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. How are you, Kieran?
I'm top of the morning.
Good. That's good. That's how you were just 5 seconds ago when I left you at the end of the last part. We can't keep this deceit going on forever, can we? We have an interview for you today, everybody. It's I say this about all our interviews, and I don't think we've disappointed you yet with any of them. This is an interview we were lucky enough to get with the CEO of the English Football League, Trevor Birch, who has a relationship with Kieran, so he kind of knew he'd be in safe hands. It's a longer one. It's not. It could have been twice as long, to be perfectly honest. But this is what Trevor had to say. Trevor, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We know how busy you are, but it's brilliant to have another chat and catch up with you in what's been quite a dramatic few months for English football. We've got many questions for you from us as well as listeners, and as you can imagine, some are quite serious. So we thought we'd ease ourselves in by, first of all, talking about your own football career and how you became, or that journey that took you to become CEO of the EFL, because you were quite a useful player, Trevor, weren't you? In a useful team.
Yeah, I don't know about that, Kevin, but this month is a significant anniversary for me. It's 50 years ago that I joined Liverpool FC as an apprentice professional.
Wow.
Only 7 of us joined that year, and 2 of us subsequently made it on professional terms. I always say I was the last player signed by Bill Shankly in 1974, who subsequently resigned as he realised he'd probably lost it. Ray Kennedy, I think, goes down as the real last player signed, but given I'd stayed on for O levels, I think I probably was about the last player of the 7 apprentices.
Wow.
Who he signed. I was then top scorer in the reserves. No first team appearance. The closest was being named in the initial 18-man squad for the 1978 European Cup final at Wembley against Bruges.
Wow.
The little Kenny Dalglish dink.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, only 16 got stripped, and I was in the stand with the Wags. So that was the closest. Then in 1979, I was transferred to Shrewsbury Town. Their club record signing at the time of £50,000. Trevor Francis was the world record at that time as the first 1 million player. So relatively, Kieran, I think I'll let you work out what I'd be worth in today's money. With Shrewsbury, we won the 3rd division, League One in today's money, and then an FA Cup winners' medal, the FA of Wales, albeit. I was then transferred to Chester as a replacement for Ian Rush, who had scored a record 46 goals the season before. I fell a tantalising 45 short in my season and duly realised I needed to find another profession. I've been taking day release study courses while playing, which then gave me an entry to an accountancy degree at Liverpool Poly, now John Moores Uni. I was fortunate to get a first-class degree and then joined EY as it is now, qualified as a chartered accountant and became a partner. whilst at EY, interestingly, I was involved with the first football administration in February 1987 when Tranmere Rovers directors ousted the owner, Bruce Osterman, who was attempting to sell the ground and turn the club into a supermarket. We sold it to Peter Johnson, who obviously got the bug because he subsequently bought Everton. And then my career turned full circle after a fortuitous meeting with the banker to Chelsea. And after meeting Ken Bates, I became the CEO of Chelsea in late 2001. And I suppose that's when the football world changed forever with the sale to Roman Abramovich. And really nothing's been the same since. I then became sorry.
Sorry, Trevor. I was going to say, were you part of that sale to Abramovich then?
Yeah, so there will be a book at some stage, Kevin. But I was the first to meet him and deal with it.
Wow,
which was just an extraordinary period.
Surely having worked with Ken Bates must have been giving you some experience of working with a megalomaniac millionaire.
You say that, but then compared to current owners of today, he was there every week in the front row. Because he was a football person. He loved the game, loved the club, and yes, he was a lovable rogue, as it were, as a few of them were at that stage, weren't they? You've got Doug Ellis, Bob Lord at Burnley. They were all football people, local football people, Kevin, and I think that's what's changed now.
I might take you up on the lovable bit about Bob Lord.
Okay,
Bob Lord,
all right.
to be honest, but they were certainly part of that was the only ownership model then, wasn't it? The local boy made good type thing. So what happened after Chelsea then? What made you decide that football administration was the
I then became a bit of a football itinerant after Chelsea. I sort of fell into undertaking firefighting roles with clubs who had some sort of financial challenge. There was Leeds, Everton, Derby, Sheffield United, where I acted as CEO. And then having done that, I dipped back into the accountancy profession in an attempt to, I suppose, get back to some kind of sanity. Then, as it turned out, I hadn't escaped because I then became administrator. I took it back to, an insolvency role. I took administrator of Portsmouth, Hearts, and then effectively a quasi-administrator of Bolton back in 2016, and then an advisor on a number of football transactions before returning back into the game full-time as chairman of Swansea, which was a fantastic time for me, having appointed and then worked with Steve Cooper, who did an amazing job. And then after a little blip at Tottenham, had the opportunity to join the EFL in 2021, and it's been an amazing time working with some great people and 72 clubs putting on great football matches, Kevin, and providing such wonderful enjoyment and work for so many people in the communities up and down the country. So there we are. That's my career in a nutshell.
I think what's interesting, Trevor, there were two things, if you don't mind me saying. What's interesting is that I think many of our listeners will be surprised that you have such experience of so many clubs, and certainly so many clubs in difficulty. So when, as you'll understand, many of our listeners' questions were about their own particular club and what's happening there and how worried they are. So you actually have some first-hand experience of what the fans are going through and what the people at the club are going through, because you've been part of that process.
Well, I have. I'd like to think that that's an experience that helps me in the current job, Kevin. But the great thing is, there's always hope. If you look at the number of clubs that were in existence 100 years ago, we may have 4 that aren't here now. If you look at any other industry, there'd be only 4 left out of the 100 probably because of the consolidation. So, clubs do endure. They go through a rocky period, but they do bounce back. Look at the Luton story, and Wrexham coming back, and Chesterfield. There are great stories out there. There's always hope. And that's the pyramid, of course. That's the beauty of the pyramid and why it needs to be protected.
I will be coming on to that, Trevor. Don't you worry. You don't. That question's ring fenced. But the other interesting thing, and I'm sure, Trevor, you're used to this, and I apologise for the shallowness in advance. But you gave us that potted CV of yours, and it's fascinating. I mainly heard Bill Shankly. And I think there's a lot of listeners our age who will mainly go, hang on a second, Bill Shankly. So you were possibly Bill Shankly. So, I mean, we have to ask, because for me, I don't think my son's just as, I'd say, he's 28, he's just as fascinated by the likes of Bill Shankly and Brian Clough and Matt Busby as I am. So I have to ask you the question about Bill. Did you have a personal relationship with him? What was he like to be around?
He's probably the greatest man I've ever met.
Wow,
Kevin. Okay, I may have been impressionable as a young boy there, but in terms of motivational ability and just the sheer presence of the man, it's literally, I've heard you talk before about, going over the top in World War One. It's that if he was there and he blew the whistle, you'd be right with him.
Wow,
it's that kind of allegiance that he gave you, and he had the ability to make players feel so good about themselves. Just an amazingly inspirational man.
And also, as well, I wasn't going to ask you this, but you raised it. We've been talking a lot recently about educational opportunities for younger players, and indeed for some older players who haven't taken the opportunity to broaden their horizon. So that's something you did as a younger player. You took yourself off to get O levels and A levels. So I presume that's something you think is really important, that we have to prepare, or at least warn footballers that there is potentially going to be a life outside football for them, and perhaps they should get other strings to the bow. And is that something you think the EFL should be doing as policy? Is it something you are doing as policy?
Yeah, we're working closely with the PFA. I mean, I was just speaking to Maheta this morning about opportunities for players coming back into the game. Either through different routes into executive administration positions, because I think they have that experience. And they just need the opportunities. Myself, I didn't really undertake the day release courses thinking, that I'd go into another career, because you're so focused, because you have to be, you have to be confident that you're going to make it. And I thought, well, I need to know something about finance because I'm going to be such a great player. I'm going to earn all this money. I need to understand that. So that's why I undertook it. And I suppose as the football went south and the education started to come to the fore, I sort of swapped roles really. But when you look at the small percentage of players that actually make it, you realise how important it is to continue with your studies, get a qualification behind you of some description. I mean, even the players who are in international level at 18, this minute number that go on to have a successful career is just staggering. In any other sport, if you're good at 18, you'd probably go on to have a career, but not football. It's just amazing.
As CEO of the EFL, Trevor, it's been a tremendous success story. But at the same time, would you say that since the last time we spoke to you, which is nearly 2 years ago, would you say they've been the most challenging 2 years of your time at the EFL?
Yeah, they are. Certain aspects have been challenging, Kevin, but overall, I don't see it as a challenging role. It's something that I enjoy. I've got a great passion for it. I love going to the games. I've said before I do about 75 games over the course of the season. So I see, and that's spread equally over all three divisions. So you can't help but be impressed with the quality of the game, with the quality of the the administration of clubs and the ownership of these clubs. I think where it has been challenging and been hard, of course, is trying to achieve this fairer distribution of the game's funding, finding a fair and equitable solution for financial cost controls. I mean, they're incredibly difficult, problems to solve, and nobody really has come up with a sensible solution to finding that. We've got this juxtaposition of the greatest league in the world happening in our country, which has a distorting effect on the rest of football in the country.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that in more detail later, if you don't mind. But it's amazing how many of the questions we got from listeners had the word pyramid in, which again we'll in more detail. I would like to ask you about something more immediately topical. And what was your reaction to the suspension of the football governance bill? And have you had any indication that it will progress in the next Parliament, regardless of who's in power?
Well, yeah, we're disappointed because we've thrown our weight behind it, Kevin. We think it's the only way that an independent body looking at the distribution of the games funds will come to a fairer distribution. So that's been disappointing. I think we heard yesterday that it's in the Tory manifesto. I think the Labour manifesto is being announced tomorrow. So we would hope that it's in that too. The issue then will be, of course, how quickly they bring it forward. It's one thing being in the manifesto, but obviously they're going to have other issues to deal with first. So we're just waiting to see how quickly either government will deal with it, because it is the only thing effectively that it would keep the Premier League's feet to the fire in terms of coming to the table with a deal.
So would you say it's important to have it or essential?
I think it's probably essential for us in terms of trying to achieve that fairer distribution, Kevin. Yeah.
Right. Before we talk about the potential deal with the Premier League, let's talk about the amazing new broadcasting deal, which, I mean, if you watch the Sky promos, it seems there'll be barely a match uncovered next season. Yeah. And obviously, financially, it seems a great deal. But football fans, being the way they are, they always look for the rattle in the engine. And there are fans, Kieran is one of them, who wonder how many traditional 3:00 kickoffs are going to be lost to Sky.
Well, look, in an ideal world, of course, Kevin, a football nostalgia, jumpers for goalposts, we'd all like to go back to every game at 3:00. Players travelling to the game together with fans, on the bus, 92 clubs all sharing the game's revenues, multiple FA Cup replays and only the FA Cup final on TV. But that world's gone forever. And the reality is that money talks, and the money has enabled us to host the best league in the world, which of course has attracted the best talent in front of the best attendances that we've ever had. So, and TV pays that money. Maybe it'd help if I just outline what, because there is a bit of distortion in the reporting of it, Kevin. So maybe if I just talk you through what the actual
of course
headlines are of it, that might help. So the majority of weekend fixtures, 26 of the 36 games will remain in their traditional slot of 3:00. So 10 games are being broadcast. They'll be in regular weekend slots, outside the so-called block hours, which is the 2:45 to 5:15, which is protected by the Article 48. So of those 10 games, 5 will be championship fixtures and 5 matches across League One and League Two. 3 of those championship games and 1 League One or Two game will be on the main Sky channel, and the remaining 2 championship games and the remaining 4 League One or Two games will be shown on that new platform, Sky Sports Plus, again, outside the 3:00 kickoff time. So if you compare it to the current situation, that's only 8 more main channel games in the championship, so 118 as opposed to 110, and then 18 more games in League One and Two over the current Sky deal. That's currently 20, that'll rise to 38. Then most of the other midweek and the bank holiday games will be shown on Sky Sports Plus, which used to be available on iFollow. So there's no real change other than they've got more prominence on that Sky platform, and we'll have a better production quality because we're increasing the number of cameras at each game. So there's like 6 in the Championship, 4 in League One and sorry, 6 in the Championship, 4 in League One and 2 in League Two.
So presumably then the streaming services will drop off.
Yeah, domestically, the Sky Sports Plus has effectively taken that. Internationally, streaming will still be allowed. And then the other great initiative, Kevin, is the advance notice that will be given on the selected fixtures.
Yeah.
So on fixture release, you'll know the TV picks up to the end of September, and then before the start of the season, you'll know fixtures up to the FA Cup third round, and then from November the 1st up to the first week in March. So it, hopefully gives fans the ability to plan a bit better for the games, even though they are being moved around. But I repeat, it's the size of the money that's coming into the game. We've increased the amount by about 50% of our broadcast deal.
This is a paid advertisement from BetterHelp Therapy Online. How's your year been so far? I don't know about you, but sometimes it feels like everything happens so fast and life can be a bit of a blur. When that happens, it's vital you take a moment to celebrate your wins and make adjustments for the rest of the year. Talking to family and friends or podcast pals can be great, but therapy can help you take stock of your progress and set achievable goals for the next 6 months.
If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and is designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you need to do to get started is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. Once you get started, you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge.
And with over 1,000 therapists in the UK already, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a wide variety of expertise in mental health. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/price. That's betterhelp.com/price.
Hi, I'm Steve Lamack, and every week I'm joined by Music Ally's Head of Insight, Stuart Dredge, on The Price of Music, the weekly podcast all about the money behind the music industry. In each episode, we discuss the very latest goings-on in the music business and dig into the finances behind the big stories.
So whether you're a music lover who just wants to know more about what really goes on in the industry, or you're an aspiring musician, manager or label owner who wants some inside knowledge on how Spotify's financial model really works, or what the future holds for independent live music venues, this is a show for you.
Subscribe to The Price of Music in your podcast app now. See you soon.
Let me run those figures. I'm taking these figures from The Guardian, Trevor, so there may be a bit of leeway because it's essentially one above Wikipedia normally when you get stuff out of The Guardian. But according to The Guardian, the deal's worth a whopping £935 million.
Yeah, over the 5 years, yeah.
Oh, yeah, over 5. But they also say that the 72 EFL clubs between them reported cumulative losses of 471 million in 22-23. So is this deal a game changer, a lifesaver even for the EFL?
Well, it's not a game changer in that it's going to offset the 471 completely, Kevin. It'll obviously go to help, but we're then back into the comparatives of the revenues available to the relegated clubs in the Championship, which then caused the inflation throughout the rest of the league and caused those losses. So it's not a game changer in that it then means we're able to be, we've got competitive balance back in the Championship, but it does help. I mean, it's in its own, it's a fantastic deal, and we're delighted with Sky and that we are a premium partner of them. But our revenues still compared to Premier League would be, say, if ours was 250 for 72 clubs, then theirs is 3.5 billion for 20 clubs.
Yeah.
So there's the differential.
Before we come on to that, there's a couple. I mean, as you're giving us figures, and as we always like to give our guests the opportunity to tell us how well things are going. I mean, we've seen average attendances up by over 10%. We've seen huge potential overseas investment. The broadcasting money is going up and up. So, on the face of it, the EFL is an absolute success story at the moment, isn't it?
It's a fantastic success, Kevin. If it was standalone, you would say everything in the garden is rosy. But it's then the proximity to the Premier League that then starts to distort everything, and that that desire to overspend to be able to compete with those relegated clubs to get into the Premier League. The cliff edge between the Premier League and the Championship drives that insanity. If it had gone and there was no Premier League and you just had the three divisions on the revenues that we generate with proper financial cost controls in, clubs would be breaking even and everybody be happy. But it's that progression through the pyramid with this blinding, obsession of getting promoted, which you have to have, given that it's so life changing. Look at Luton. They will have had the funding now to be able to build their new ground. So it's life changing.
Well, can I bring Kieran in there, if you don't mind, Trevor? Because Kieran's argument has always been, I'm not putting it shouldn't be life changing, and the fact that it is so life changing is what is causing some clubs to risk that life by going for it. Kieran, your argument's always been that the cliff edge is just way too big, isn't it, Kieran, financially?
It is. It as Trevor correctly said, it encourages casino spending, because if you've got a 3 in 24 chance of getting £180 million, how much are you willing to pay for a ticket? And that's what club owners are doing. I mean, before we came on air, Trevor and I were discussing the philanthropy and benevolence of some of the owners at Championship level, and also at League One level, because there's a big cliff edge between the Championship and League One as well. And that encourages overspending. The problem is the gaps are so big. And sort of to quote the figures that I have, since the Premier League started, consumer prices have doubled in the UK. As Trevor was saying, if we take a look at the EFL as a whole, the Championship revenues are up 1,000% when prices are only up 100%. That's absolutely brilliant. But if you're doing fantastically well at 70 miles an hour for 30 years, the Premier League revenues are up by 2,800%. So they're going at 200 miles an hour. And that's the problem. The terrible thing to say, the Premier League's been too successful. And if we had a 92 again, I think we could get to a better distribution, because we could start to look at what's best for football as a whole. The Premier League is a breakaway product in exactly the same way as the proposals for the Super League is a breakaway product. My view is that we should get everybody under the same umbrella. It won't happen.
And that's the problem, isn't it, Kieran? In that it needs a third party, which is what hopefully the independent football regulator would be, to be able to say, well, here's a blank piece of paper. What is the best sharing of revenues methodology? But having said that, not wanting to destroy the Premier League in its position as the best league in the world, and I think we all, respect that. You respectively, support two Premier League teams. You watch fantastic football week in, week out. You wouldn't want to destroy that. But they're so far ahead of any of the other European leagues, they can still share some of that wealth without destroying their prominence.
Well, the other problem is that the top 3 clubs in the Premier League are so far ahead of the rest of us that that's distorting as well. But sorry, Kevin. That is the other problem, of course. Is that's why you can't get any unity in the Premier League. Is they've got their own cliff edge. The European clubs are just accelerating away. I'm going to come back to this, Trevor. I'm just worried. I'm worried that if I don't, I'm going to forget to ask about a smaller elephant in the room, something that our listeners are just as obsessed by, which is owners, directors tests, unfit, proper persons, whatever you want to call it. We've had a lot of questions on this, but they can be summed up by two from Anthony Davis, who's a Morecambe fan, and Justin Rice, who's a Sheffield United fan. Between them, they ask, how vigorously have EFL policies grown to ensure prospective owners are open, honest and transparent with proof of funds? And what are the specific red flags you look for? And you'll understand, and you've told us about your own experience with clubs going into administration. And I think it's partly Kieran and I's fault. Fans are terrified now. There's economics are so volatile at the moment. Everybody's worried about it. And understandably, their first thought as they wake up in the morning is our club. When we published a list of things we're talking about on the next day's pod, we just get panicky tweets from all the clubs and say, are we in trouble? And that's... Yeah. So, and I think for better, for worse, football fans, it's the owners that are getting blamed by all football fans. Good owners tend to get less credit, and people are terrified that their club is going to fall victim to some chancer from somewhere else. Who knows? So what are you doing? How can you answer those two?
Well, it's defining what a good owner is as well, isn't it, Kevin? Because they become a bad owner for many fans when they don't spend enough or buy the wrong players, and so the same fans who are worried about the financial position of the club are the same fans then who are saying, well, there's no ambition shown by the ownership. You've got to get out and sell. And these may be owners who have invested significant money, because no owners take cash out of the business as dividends. It's only going one way. And what's normally happened over the years is, because we run that, benevolent patronage ownership model, they suddenly get fed up and turn off the tap. Just returning to your question, I suppose we're more robust in the way that we undertake the owners and directors test these days. It was substantially updated following the loss of Bury. I'll caveat by saying that was before my time.
Yeah.
And under that old test, an individual could buy shares in the club and present themselves to us as the owner, and we'd be powerless to do anything because they already had control. They then had 10 days after the purchase to provide evidence of their ongoing funding, which is what happened with Steve Dale at Bury, who then couldn't prove he had the funds. Of course, the initial problems caused by the previous owners selling to somebody without undertaking the necessary due diligence, as they're so desperate to stop that financial pain. I think the rules are now changed, so clubs can't be sold without prior approval. And we've also changed it so that the clubs have to update their own articles of association to make clear that the board of directors of a club can't have to refuse to register a transfer of shares where our clearance hasn't been granted. And then we've gone even further. We've made it clear that clubs and owners are not allowed to sign deals subject to EFL approval. So that's another way of owners signing a sale and purchase agreement and then saying, right, over to the EFL, you approve them, and we get all the flack because we don't approve them in time, given that we've still got questions to answer. But if you look at some of the issues we've had, and specifically with some of your listeners questioning around what we look for, if you think about the Wigan takeover, for example, with Mike Danson, who was local billionaire, one person, readily identifiable with provable wealth. I mean, that was done in under 2 weeks. Once they start talking about collateralized loans, shareholdings in complex, opaque corporate structures as evidence of their funding, that normally gives us a problem, particularly if it's a foreign situation as well. And then we've had those recent social media posts of potential owners with non-existent planes or houses they don't own. If we can see a track record, Kevin, in an established business to support those funds, for example, sales of assets or stocks or shares, they're all traceable and there's documentation. It's where they come to us and they just say, here's the money in a bank account with no visible supporting documentation to show how it got there. So it's pretty easy if you've got it and it's been legally accumulated, then normally you can verify it to us.
I suppose.
Just with Kieran with his T-shirt on about wrong uns, they're very difficult to weed out as they can, appear very credible. If you think about Chris Kirchner at Derby, he fooled everybody. Shareholders and fellow directors in that slink, the Derby county's administrators, major banks who handle all his funds, major law firms who are acting for him. And yes, probably us here at the EFL, but thankfully we did push back, which eventually gave the FBI time to catch up with him for wire fraud. But it's so very difficult.
Yeah, I have mentioned to Kieran before that perhaps he should pick and choose which guests to wear that you're a wrong un T-shirt, Trevor, to be perfectly honest. There are two things off the back of that, because in a way, in terms of approving takeover deals, as we've seen with the Premier League and Everton, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because the Premier League were criticised, I think rightly, for taking so long to make that Everton decision. But if they'd made the decision quickly and potentially denied Everton decent new owners, then there would have been a trouble. And also the other thing, and this has been put to us many times in the past, there's one thing to ask for proof of funds from a potential new owner, but why can't we ask the potential new owner to put some of those funds into a separate account so you know that the club at least has enough money to get through their first year?
Well, yeah, we do now. We've got what new owners have to put secured funding in place,
right,
which is basically for 2 years once they've signed. But that's only for new owners, not for existing owners. So that's what they have to prove, and they have to show us that they've got the the wherewithal to support those 2 years of funding.
And are you, again, this is a question we've been asked many times, are you constantly keeping an eye on clubs, all 72 clubs? Are you keeping an eye on their accounts? Are you looking for red flags for clubs that have had owners for maybe 5-10 years? Or does it come as a surprise to you as it comes to fans sometimes when suddenly an owner gets bored or an owner runs out of money or goes bankrupt?
Yeah, well, we've set up the our club financial reporting unit, which is separate unit to the EFL, which controls all the profit and sustainability calculations and reports that are presented to it by the championship clubs, and then the salary cost controls reports that are presented by the League 1 and 2 clubs. So we've got a pretty good idea of at any point in time the state of the finances of the club. But like I say, the issues we've had historically have just been an owner who simply just turns off the tap. And sometimes, because we don't have the performance bond or money locked in an account, that immediately can cause huge issues for us. So we haven't been able to get that particular regulation through our clubs, that they have to put effectively funds for a season or 2 seasons into a locked account.
Let's take a deep breath and get back to the Premier League. I'd be interested to hear your response, Trevor, to one Premier League club owner who I won't name, but you might be able to guess who it is, who said to me that the EFL have nothing to negotiate with, which is a pretty stark way of putting it, and an indication that the Premier League, it seems to the rest of us, aren't taking the notion of a redistribution of funds equally in any way seriously.
Well, I mean, it's a fair observation, isn't it? In a way, if we go to the negotiating table and say, give us some more money, and they say no, there isn't a lot that we can actually bargain with, other than what they give us solidarity monies at the moment under a solidarity agreement, where we have to comply with rules relating to youth development and other things, and the adherence to the profit and sustainability rules, for example, have to be adhered to. So we've got very little bargaining chip, which is why you need that external regulator to say, well, hang on, no, it's not a fair distribution. We need to intervene.
I might sound, well, I know I sound hopelessly old-fashioned and romantic here, but is not the notion of fair play and fair distribution and retention of the pyramid, is that not a bargaining tool in itself? How is it that you can't persuade the Premier League that the pyramid is the most important thing in English football?
Why would they value it, Kevin? I mean, yes, they may say they value it, but in terms of hard pounds, shillings, and pence, that's a different matter. A lot of those top clubs, as we talked about, are looking globally as opposed to looking down at the pyramid. The pyramid, other than taking loans from some of the clubs, and they're not necessarily seeing the value of the pyramid and what it does throughout the country with the community work that's undertaken. It's 72 clubs within 38 million people throughout the country. But if you're an owner of one of the mega clubs, it doesn't really enhance your shareholder value, does it?
Well, it doesn't. But there are 14 other clubs in the Premier League, Trevor. And Kieran and I support notionally established Premier League clubs, but I think there's only 5 or 6 teams in the Premier League that can safely say they will never be part of the pyramid again.
I know.
So this is what I don't understand the short-sightedness of that.
Well, exactly. So you've had all those statistics about how many clubs have been within the Premier League. I think it's 50, and how a certain section of clubs have been in the Premier League as long as they've been in the EFL kind of thing, and it's only those top clubs who are immune for it. But if it were that simple, Kevin, 14 should be able to outvote them. Then they should be able to get anything through. But the problem is, it's riven with factions and frictions between them, and the whole thing about now the PL taking action against clubs for breaches of financial controls. It creates, huge friction and tension within the league, and then trying to get things voted through is incredibly difficult for them. Even though the executive might want and do realise the benefit of the pyramid. Richard Scudamore, Richard Masters both started in the EFL, so they're well aware of the importance of the EFL to the game, but trying to get clubs, and we go back to, those, we talked about Ken Bates, Doug Ellis, they were always there, they were always around the table. I'm not sure every owner's around the table now in the Premier League. They'll send the solicitor or the legal guy to make a statement, as opposed to talking and being collaborative.
I think also, Trevor, they underestimate, I think everybody in football to an extent underestimates how unhappy it makes fans. Most football fans simply want to turn up, go to the pub, go to the cafe, go to the game, talk about the game afterwards. And yet football fans are inundated now with constant daily pressures about will there be a Super League? Will the league exist? Will there be enough money for the 72? And we don't want that. In a way, life was so much simpler when you knew that the bloke who owned your club was a local butcher and he owned your club forever. But now you'll see as many stories on the back pages and the front pages about football finance, and it's baffling. I'd like to ask as well, in terms of your relationship with the Premier League and the FA, were you completely blindsided by that decision to scrap FA Cup replays?
Well, we weren't blindsided, but we knew it was on the cards. But it was always part of a wider debate on the calendar, on the redistribution. So it was all part and parcel of that, along with double-legged Carabao Cup semi-finals. They were all effectively on the table to be discussed. I mean, you saw the statement from the FA, which was a bilateral agreement between Premier League and FA. So FA grassroots get more money. They scrap the replays, helps those European clubs in the Premier League, and we lose out. So there is talk at the moment of looking at sharing more funds, but those discussions are still ongoing. So it's just a shame that we can't, all get together to sort it out.
And is there a major issue, a reduction in fixtures? Is that the simple sticking point? Is it as simple as if you say, okay, we'll drop the Carabao Cup, they'll go fine, here's the money?
Well, I mean, it is a congested calendar, Kevin. You know, when any games are postponed, how difficult it is to fit those into a very, very congested calendar. And there's more European games than ever. There, you've got the FIFA now with Club World Cups and all the international games. All of those have an impact on the calendar. You know, in the old days, say you could win the European Cup playing probably 4 or 5 games. You know, now it's up to over 20. So it's, the calendar is so congested that replays, double leg games probably, at some stage have to go.
I've got 3 more questions for you, Trevor. I'm not going to lie, they're not yes and no answers. But the first come from fans. And because you'll understand the idea of financial redistribution and competitive balance is one that very much occupies our listeners. Peter Couchman and Jason Burt are a representative sample, pointing out the massive advantage that teams relegated from the Premier League have, and using this season as an example, to remind us that all 3 promoted teams went back down, and it was only the very well-funded Ipswich that prevented all 3 relegated teams going straight back up. So would if discussions with the Premier League went the way you wanted, would that help? Would that mean more Championship clubs were able to aim for the Premier League without bankrupting themselves?
Yeah, first of all, I'd just like to say Ipswich, I know that you say they were well-funded, but, they've done a brilliant job this year.
Absolutely so.
To have been able to compete and get in amongst those 3 top relegated clubs from last year is just an absolute magnificent achievement. So, you have to take your hat off to them. But back to the question, it's exactly the reason why we're seeking a fairer distribution of funds. And it is getting more acute because in the last 4 years, I think, it's one, and we have to look at those automatic places. So only 1, which is Ipswich, of those 8 automatic places have gone to a non-parachute club.
Right.
Showing it can be done, but the odds are massively stacked against you going up automatically, with those 7 of the other places going to the parachute clubs. And then if you look at the playoffs, it's a little bit more encouraging in that 3 out of the last 4 winners have had no parachute. But as I say, the odds are stacked against you, and don't forget, you're losing 15 to 20 million pounds a year per year on average for the potential of gambling for that 1 playoff place, because it looks like those automatic places are out of reach. So it's a gamble on that playoff place, and of course going up and down, which is what we've seen this year, and it's a problem then for the Premier League, because the Premier League's premise is we're the best league in the world, best quality. Every game, could be won by either team, but we've seen some large scores this year, Kevin. And if you think back to the Sheffield United Arsenal game, I think was it, when they were about 6-0 up within 30 minutes. Now they took the foot off the accelerator then and took players off. But if you get a couple of games where there's a 10-0 or a 12-0, then suddenly people are going to be looking at the league and saying, "Hey, hang on, this isn't the the greatest league anymore. There isn't that strength of quality for every team." So I think it has to be a concern for the Premier League. It's obviously a concern for us because our clubs can't compete with those parachute clubs coming down, and it causes that irrational behaviour from our owners. So, but I repeat, it's not an easy, conundrum to solve.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the perception of the Premier League. To be honest, and I spoke about this to Brighton fans the other night. Kieran and I both support teams. We're in a league that we can't win. The limit of our ambition is a place in Europe, and that's probably beyond one of our clubs. And since Leicester won it, the top six have made sure that we can't win it again. So the Premier League need to address that as well.
And you know what, Kevin? When I talk to those owners of those relegated clubs and the enjoyment they get from their season in the Championship, they're winning games, they're playing attacking football as opposed to parking the bus and not getting beaten 10-0 in the Premier League. It's think about the atmosphere at Leeds United, for example, and that semi-final, the playoff semi.
Yeah,
I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah,
getting to the final. They will never have that kind of atmosphere week in, week out in the Premier League because it's the competition is so skewed.
Yeah,
and with no prospect, as you say, of winning the title. So all you're trying to do at any particular game is have a decent game and win a game, but there's no real jeopardy other than trying to avoid getting relegated.
Yeah, and in an ideal world, would you scrap parachute payments, reduce parachute payments?
Well, no, you can't. You can't do that. And Kieran has. Look, he's looked at it. He's got every spreadsheet under the sun, hasn't he? And it's not. It's just an impossible. Almost seemingly impossible nut to crack in terms of how you and the problem is we are where we are with it, isn't it? It's like just being presented with the problem and looking at the problem and trying to solve that. You've got an improvement plan. If you look at the solution and then work towards that, then maybe that's a transformational plan. So whether we can ever get to a situation where we have a blank piece of paper and then see, well, what do we want as the solution? I'm not sure. All we can do really is tinker around the edges, is get some more money into the game, is stop our owners having to fund at the levels they're funding to at least have, limit some of the pain and give them half a chance.
Our penultimate question, Trevor, takes us to the other end of the EFL and your relationship with the National League, who seem to be, I don't know, we've described them as scrappy-do recently because they seem to be enjoying standing next to Scooby and throwing their weight about. But Tom Lawrence, one of our listeners, asked if there'd be any benefit to the EFL and the National League if you were to expand to include another division. And to be fair, I mean, even Sky talk about the National League as being a de facto League 3 already, don't they?
Yeah. Again, when we've talked about the redistribution, we've talked about looking down as well as up. So at some stage that might be considered in the whole. But at the moment, there'd be no economic benefit to the EFL. We've just completed new deals on broadcasting sponsorship for the next 4 to 5 years. So adding any teams to the competition would probably only add cost. There still remains the debate, of course, over the whole question of 3 up, 3 down. And that debate needs to happen when there's that wider agreement with the Premier League on redistribution and the calendar with the FA. We continue to work on aligning regulations between the two leagues to make that the transition a bit more seamless. But there are still significant differences on salary cost controls, artificial surfaces, of course.
Of course.
Security of ground tenure, as we saw with Gateshead, that's still an issue in that we require 10 years security. So there are a number of issues still that need to be ironed out.
It's such a difficult league to get out of, isn't it? The National League now, and it's really interesting how fans, Sky can talk as much as they want about the National League being the de facto League 3. Fans want to be in the 92. And fans, I'm sure there are fans of many clubs that have gone into the National League that have enjoyed themselves in the way that relegated teams into the Championships enjoy themselves. But fans want to be within that. It's almost like a comfort blanket of being and of course the National League are part of the pyramid, but being part of the 92 seems to give fans much more security than being outside it.
Yeah, well, and the monetary rewards for being within the league and the whole professionalism of the setup. I think if you ask the clubs, that's the things that they would, and of course the academy system as well plays a big part in that.
Yeah. Kieran's just flicking through his ornithology book to see if he could identify that bird song that just appeared suddenly. Our final question, Trevor.
Yeah,
I think it might be a difficult one for you to answer because it's actually quite a difficult one to ask, to be perfectly honest, because it's such a personal and passionate question. And it comes from James Grimes from Gambling with Lives. He asks about a subject we discuss a lot on the pod, and he gives us some personal context. He says watching EFL games as a person in recovery from gambling addiction is a hellish experience, made worse when your sponsors send self-excluded gamblers like him 100 free spins on online slots. So he asked why you assume it's safe to name leagues after a gambling company when we increasingly learn that gambling is associated with huge social harms. And I would say that today Palace are launching their new kits there, the new sponsors. I'm terrified. I really, really hope we don't go back to a gambling sponsor. We've had Cinch for 2 years. I'll be desperately disappointed if we go back to a gambling sponsor. And God knows Kieran and I understand more than anybody do the fact that you can't turn down funding. But this is an issue for a lot of people, Trevor, isn't it?
It's an incredibly difficult to issue. And of course, you've got to have great sympathy for the situation of your listener there and others similarly affected. We do understand that gambling and sports sponsorship is a very emotive issue with people holding very different views and very strong views. I would say that the UK gambling industry is one of the world's most regulated gambling industries. We know that there are some who have had direct experience of gambling problems and who would like to see gambling prohibited or at least greater restrictions on its promotion. Of course, the other side of the equation is millions of people enjoy betting and see it very much part of their match day enjoyment. I mean, even Kieran participates with his bizarre match day ritual of betting against his own team to offset any pain of losing. But Kevin, we're not complacent, and we do realise that we need to address this issue, which is why over that 10-year, and it is a 10-year sponsorship with Sky Bet, we've worked hard in developing and engaging on work around safer gambling. And in 2017, the partnership was the first to produce an MOU with guidelines helping to minimise the risk of gambling harm. We've actually spent the last couple of years discussing these issues with the government as part of its review of the Gambling Act, and this has given everybody, whatever their view, the opportunity have a say on the issues. I suppose in the end, the government has taken the view that sponsorship of football clubs, sponsorship of football competitions shouldn't be prohibited. But they have made clear we've got to raise standards, how these sponsorships are delivered, and are producing this code of conduct that will apply across the whole of sport. There's football, rugby, cricket, horse racing. That work is ongoing, and we anticipate the code to be in use at the start of the new season.
Well, that's good to hear. But you mentioned horse racing, and one of the frustrating things for me is I'll bet on a horse. I have a £10 limit each week. That's as much as I will bet. I love horse racing. But what I don't understand is why football doesn't make more money out. Why isn't football not charging a levy to the bookmakers the way that horse racing does? Because horse racing
it's up to the government, I think, isn't it? And that's the thing. We also believe it's only fair that football clubs should see a benefit from the revenues from the gambling industry. Because they make those revenues without bearing any of the costs.
Yeah.
So I suppose responsibly marketed partnerships are at least the only way, really, or a fair way to see investment return to the EFL clubs and the communities. And it is making a difference. Sky Bet have been involved with the a fund, an infrastructure fund, 6 million infrastructure fund, providing grants for clubs Also partnered with British Heart Foundation. Every minute matters to recruit 300,000 people to learn CPR. So there is some great work that they are doing in our communities.
Trevor, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and to get your insight onto a range of serious issues. I'm hoping that the next time we get you back, all of football's problems will be resolved and we can just hear more about your career and you can tell us about games that you've been to. But in the meantime, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, Trevor.
Thanks, Kevin.
First of all, Kieran, I think I need to apologise to a lot of our listeners whose questions didn't get read out. That's partly because we made a decision between us that it wouldn't be fair to ask Trevor about individual clubs, and a lot of our questions were about individual clubs. But he was happy to take some questions, some difficult ones as well. My takeaway from that, Kieran, was a small detail because Trevor just seems in a state of bafflement when it comes to the Premier League negotiations about fairer distribution of money. He just seems genuinely baffled about why they're digging their heels in. But what really surprised me was when he said that quite often they don't even turn up themselves. It's the CEOs or the actual club owners are not appearing at meetings. They're sending solicitors. And I just think that's disrespectful. That's just, I was astonished to hear that, Kieran. I was so surprised that I didn't actually, by the time I'd pulled myself together to say to Trevor, hang on a second, he was off on another answer. But I was absolutely shocked by that.
I think it's also an indication of the arrogance of some clubs in that they are so stubborn, they are so unwilling to see the broader issues with regards to football, that a phoned-in statement via a legal representative is deemed, because they're effectively saying to the EFL, look, you're going to get nowhere. Everything that has been not promised but hinted at has subsequently been either delayed or withdrawn. And Trevor was, again, I think he was very honest in saying, look, we aren't in a strong negotiating position, and therefore you're relying on the other person, the other party, doing the right thing. And this is clearly against the grain of many of the owners of Premier League clubs.
Yeah, and also, as we discussed in the body of the last pod, that the notion that the EFL are not negotiating with the Premier League, they're negotiating with 4 different Premier Leagues. It says you can't predict on any given day what angle clubs will be taking. So it's not like there's a consistent Premier League position that you can negotiate with. That must be very frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, it's clear that there are shifting sands as far as the alliances within the Premier League is concerned. They've got views on individual issues. Apart from collectively, they seem to want to give 2 fingers to the EFL and the pyramid as a whole.
And also very adamant on the importance of the independent regulator.
Yes, and again, I think this is a practical position being taken by the EFL. We've established that they don't have a strong negotiating hand, so therefore having a third party who can come in and can bang heads together does make sense. We saw the Premier League prevaricate over a long period of time. It seems like light years ago, but it wasn't. Remember when Liz Truss was in charge and the libertarian wing of the party, of the government, effectively said, we are ideologically opposed to any form of regulation. And even the very small concessions that the Premier League at that point in time were willing to give, they were immediately taken off the table. So the Premier League is going to therefore take advantage of the fact that we are in a political vacuum at present with no government as such, because all of the focus is on the election campaign, and is also banking on the fact that whatever government we have in charge post-election, the first thing it will be saying is we don't need to focus on football regulation. We've got, if it's the Labour Party, they've been out of power for 14 years, and they're going to say, well, look, we need to address matters A, B, and C. If it's the present government, we don't know what their objectives are. All that we can say is that it is in their manifesto as a commitment to the regulator. But when is another matter.
Yeah, I'm aware, Kieran, that there will be listeners who think that we were on the side of Trevor Birch when it comes to the negotiations with the Premier League, and there's a reason for that, Kieran. That's because we're on the side of Trevor Birch when it comes to the negotiations with the Premier League for the most part. And sometimes I think you just have to put your hands up and say, we try to be as neutral as possible, but every now and again you just have to go, I'm with you, mate. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod as well, it'd be very kind of you, and it'll get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes, and you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you want a question answered on our question show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com, and go to the same website if you want to buy our book. Our paperback's coming up soon. And don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter, X, and YouTube. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.